15 nannies had quit in less than a year. They called the Billionaire's 3 orphan children monsters. The house was a war zone of grief and anger. I was an unqualified nanny with no degree and no references, but I had a secret they couldn't see on a resume. I was once a child just like them. This is the story of how I walked into a broken home, not to fix it, but to stay. The 15th nanny to leave the Blackwood estate looked like she had just survived a small war. Flour clung to her shoes, strands of confetti were tangled in her hair, and a streak of blue paint, source unknown, stained her back. The automatic gates closed quietly behind her. No goodbyes, no one to stop her. Only the familiar, heavy silence of a home long accustomed to short-lived farewells. 15 people in just 1 year. A household with 3 grieving 6-year-olds and a father too busy building an empire to notice that his own home was crumbling. The following Monday morning, I stood before that same gate. A pale mist still hung in the air, a lingering chill from a winter not yet willing to leave. I carried nothing but an old canvas bag, a thick ash-gray coat, and a gaze that had learned long ago to reveal little. My name is Chloe, and I was about to become nanny number 16. It was in that moment, as I placed my hand on the cold iron of the gate, that the first quiet note of change was struck, a change that wouldn't come from shouting matches or strict schedules, but from someone patient enough not to walk away. 1 year earlier, Catherine Blackwood passed away on an early winter morning. The vibrant heart of the estate stopped beating. The woman who once filled the grand halls with the scent of baking bread, who braided Maya's hair, who straightened Liam's sleeves, and who reminded Noah not to make a face while brushing his teeth, was simply gone. It was pancreatic cancer, a thief in the night. By the time they found it, it was already terminal. Her husband, Alexander Blackwood, a man whose name commanded respect in boardrooms across the world, received the news with a terrifying stillness. He didn't scream, he didn't collapse. He did what powerful men do when faced with something they cannot control. He went to work. The office, with its clean lines and logical problems, became his fortress against the illogical, messy chaos of grief. But the children had no fortress. They had nowhere to hide. The house became a silent battleground. Noah, the eldest by a few minutes, and once the responsible big brother, withdrew into a shell of wary observation. Liam, impulsive and fiery, became the epicenter of every tantrum, his anger a raw, desperate cry for the mother who was no longer there to soothe him. And Maya, the youngest, the quiet one, she simply retreated. She didn't cry. She just clutched her stuffed rabbit, a fluffy creature named Jasper, and hid under tables whenever a door slammed too hard. The first nanny, a woman with impeccable credentials, left after 3 days. The second lasted a week. The ones that followed, no matter how experienced, all gave up. They left behind whispered warnings and defeated notes. They don't need a nanny, they need a miracle. I sat in my small one-room apartment, the rain tapping a dreary rhythm against the window pane, scrolling through job listings. Nanny with degree in child psychology, minimum 5 years experience, references from prestigious families required. My resume was a blank space where those qualifications should have been. I had been a nanny for nearly 8 years, but it was the unofficial kind, born from necessity and instinct. I had no certificates, no degrees, but every child I had ever cared for had called me the one who didn't leave. Still, in this city, kindness didn't get you past the first filter. Wealthy families didn't see the one thing that truly qualified me, the ability to recognize a child's pain on sight. Because I had once been that child. At 7 years old, I lost both my parents in a suburban bus accident. The foster care system became my world, a blur of strange houses and temporary families. I was a living package, shuffled from one home to the next. I learned to be silent. I learned not to expect anything. I learned how to hold myself tight when I woke up from nightmares in an unfamiliar bed.
Pain didn't break me. It gave me a different kind of sight. It taught me that a child's anger is often a mask for fear, and that mischief can be a desperate plea for attention. I understood this in my bones, in a way no textbook could ever teach me. That night, just as I was about to give up, I saw the posting. Experienced nannies sought for 3 6-year-old children at a large estate in the Blackwood area. Previous applicants have found this position highly challenging. Challenging. It was a rich person's word for impossible, but I knew how to read between the lines. It was also a word for desperate. I searched the name. Catherine Blackwood passed away 10 months ago, leaving behind her husband, Alexander Blackwood, and their 6-year-old triplets. The family has hired and lost 15 nannies in less than a year. I saw a blurred, grayscale photo of the 3 children. Their eyes were wide, their faces unsmiling. And in their lost, guarded expressions, I saw myself at 7. I saw the silent, defiant question, "If I hurt you first, will you leave too?" I closed my eyes. An old familiar instinct, the one that had guided me through the darkest years of my life, whispered to me. I reopened my laptop. I skipped the professional qualifications box. I didn't attach a single reference. In the section for reason for applying, I typed just one sentence. I was once a child left behind.
The air in Alexander Blackwood's second-floor study was thick with fatigue. He was leaning back in his massive leather chair, flipping through the file of the 3rd applicant he had seen that day. He no longer expected much. When his housekeeper, a kind, weary-looking woman named Mrs. Gable, informed him that one more candidate had arrived, he merely nodded. But when I walked in, something shifted. I didn't apologize for being late. I didn't scramble to make excuses. I simply set down my old canvas bag, took off my coat, and sat across from him with a calm, steady gaze. His discomfort was palpable. My quiet presence seemed to unnerve him more than any loud, boastful resume. "You didn't bring a resume," he stated, his voice tired. I shook my head. "I'm not good at writing about myself." He sighed, a man at the end of his rope. "Then, talk about yourself." I paused. My gaze drifted to the window, where the late afternoon sun cast long shadows through the bare maple trees. "I grew up in foster care," I began. "At first, I hated all the adults. They came, they made promises, and then they disappeared. The person I remember most was an old woman who used to bring me fresh bread. She never said much. She would just sit next to me and let me cry. One time, I asked her why she never asked me what was wrong. She said, 'You already have too many questions inside you that no one can answer. I'm just here so you don't have to ask one more.'" The room fell silent. Alexander Blackwood looked at me for a long, long time. An image of his daughter, Maya, flashed in his mind. The way she curled up under the table, refusing to come out, as if the whole world were a question too frightening to ask. "What do you think of my children?" he finally asked. I tilted my head as if listening to a sound from very far away. "I think they are screaming in silence," I said softly, "each in their own way. But I don't see them as the problem. I just see 3 children who need permission to be sad." He said nothing, but when I left the room, before Mrs. Gable could even ask, he simply said, "Hire her." "Are you sure?" she asked, her voice laced with the weariness of 15 failed attempts. "She might quit after a week." A muscle twitched in his jaw. "I don't know what she'll do," he admitted, "but she's the first one who didn't look at my children like they were a problem that needed to be fixed." My first morning began at 6:30 a.m. Mrs. Gable opened the door with a nod and a quiet, "Good look," before disappearing into the back of the house, as if unwilling to witness another casualty. I had barely stepped inside when it began.
Splash. A bucket of ice-cold water rigged from the second-floor railing drenched me from head to toe. I looked up. Noah was peeking over the edge, the rope still in his hand, his face a perfect, emotionless mask. "Oh, sorry, I forgot it was Thursday." Before I could react, I heard a whoosh from the kitchen doorway. I turned. A cloud of flour erupted into the air, covering me in a fine white powder. Liam stood there, holding a sifter, a wide, triumphant grin on his face. "You're new. Welcome to the initiation." I didn't yell. I didn't scold. I simply coughed softly, brushing the flour from my hair, and bent down to place my wet shoes neatly on the rug. On the arm of the sofa, a welcome sign had been taped on with what looked like superglue, wrinkling the expensive upholstery. On the floor, a barricade of toy cars blocked the path to the living room. And in the corner, curled up into a small, tight ball, was Maya. She was clutching a doll to her chest, her eyes wide and wary. As I took a slow step in her direction, she let out a scream. Not a cry for help, but a sharp, piercing shriek, a primal firewall against a world of intruders. I stopped. I didn't try to touch her. I didn't offer empty reassurances. I just sat down on the floor a few feet away from her. She stared at me, her chest heaving. Then, with all her might, she hurled the doll at me. Its plastic head hit the wall with a sharp crack, and it landed in a tangled heap on the carpet. The room fell silent. Noah raised an eyebrow from upstairs. Liam held his breath. I remained seated. I picked up the doll. I didn't fix its hair. I didn't dust it off. I simply placed it gently on the carpet, right within Maya's reach. And then I folded my hands in my lap, and I waited. I just sat there, flour still clinging to my shoulders, cold water soaking my back, tape stuck in my hair, but I didn't leave. After 10 long, silent minutes, Liam picked up a marker and started idly drawing on a pillow. Noah came downstairs and lightly kicked the toy car barricade aside. Maya didn't move closer, but she didn't scream again. She just watched me. Then, with a sudden, jerky movement, she snatched the doll back and hugged it tightly, as if nothing had ever happened. I didn't know how long that moment of peace would last, but I knew that in the world of children who have been left behind, the one who stays is the first seed of trust. I sat there, soaked and smudged, but with a quiet warmth spreading inside me, like the first ray of sunlight piercing the thickest winter cloud.
The media crisis began with a single anonymous email sent to 3 local newspapers in the dead of night. The first headline was simple and brutal: "The Blackwood House, the darkness behind the gilded gates." Within 12 hours, the story was a wildfire. An anonymous social media account posted what it claimed were behind-the-scenes images: a flour-stained shirt, paint smudges on a priceless carpet, and a chilling caption: "Nanny number 16 still hasn't left, but it doesn't seem to be out of choice." I woke up that morning to find my name tagged in hundreds of comments. The court of public opinion was swift and merciless. Psychological abuse, labor exploitation, soulless rich people. Several parents from the children's school signed a petition demanding a CPS inspection, citing a potentially unstable and abusive environment. That afternoon, I sat alone in the vast, silent living room. The lazy sunlight crept through the curtains, casting long, pale shadows across my face. On my phone, a message from an old friend from the foster care system lit up the screen. "Chloe, you should leave. People like that will not protect you." She was right. I knew she was right. I placed the phone face down and leaned my head back, closing my eyes. An old, familiar wind rose inside me. The feeling of being forgotten, of being a pawn in someone else's story. Alexander walked in, his shirt still creased from an emergency meeting about the PR nightmare I had become. He looked at me, his face a mask of helplessness. Here was a man who negotiated billion-dollar deals without blinking, and yet standing before me, a quiet, defeated woman, he had no idea what to say. It was Mrs. Gable who broke the silence. She placed a gentle, wrinkled hand on my shoulder. "You don't have to go through this," she said softly. "I've seen good people walk away, not because they were weak, but because this world is too quick to condemn those who try to heal things quietly." I looked up. The light in my eyes dimmed. Was I wrong? Was I wrong to think that just staying would be enough? Mrs. Gable didn't answer right away. Her gaze drifted to a small photo frame on the bookshelf. It was an old picture of Catherine, the children's mother, her face smeared with ice cream, holding the three of them, all smiling with a pure, uncomplicated joy. "Chloe," Mrs. Gable said slowly, "you are not wrong. It's just that the world always rushes to punish those who choose to love quietly." That evening, exhausted and heartsick, I was searching for a children's book, something to bring a moment of calm to the storm. As I pulled a book from a high shelf in the library, a small, folded piece of paper slipped out. The handwriting was slanted, gentle, and achingly familiar, like a ghost's breath. It was a letter from Catherine. "Alexander," it began, "if you are reading this, it means I am no longer here. I am so sorry. Not for leaving, that was beyond my control, but for all the things I didn't have time to teach our children. I wish I had one more spring to show Maya how to braid her hair, one more summer to hold Liam's hand without shouting, 'Be careful!' and one more autumn to watch Noah learn how to hide his sensitive heart behind his toughness. My love, I know you are strong. Logic has always been your armor. But please remember, our children don't need a commander. They need a home. They need to believe that even when everyone else leaves, someone will stay. Noah won't say it, but he is terrified of being forgotten. Liam gets angry because his heart is too big for his body, and Maya will retreat into herself if she is not seen with gentleness. You don't have to be perfect. You only need to be patient enough to stay. I am not here anymore to rock them to sleep, but I believe that if you let love lead you instead of duty, they will grow like saplings shaped by the wind. Not perfectly straight, but strong. I love you, and I believe in you, Catherine." I sat on the edge of the bed, the ink on the page blurring through my tears. The words, her love, it was the kind of love that made no grand gestures, but simply existed as a safe place to rest in the storm. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in the drawer, and in that moment I made my decision. No grand promises, no dramatic declarations, just not leaving. The next morning, I was in the kitchen before dawn. I didn't do it to earn favor or prove a point. I did it because I missed my own mother, and because I understood that sometimes the simplest things are the small flames that can warm a cold, grieving heart. I started baking chocolate chip cookies. I didn't call the children to breakfast. I just let the warm, buttery scent of vanilla and melting chocolate drift through the silent house. Noah came first, his face guarded as always, but he just stood there, watching. Liam followed, clutching his worn-out teddy bear. Maya came last, her eyes puffy, her small feet padding silently on the cold wooden floor. They stood in a line, looking at me. No yelling, no throwing, just quiet, cautious observation. I smiled faintly without turning around. "When I was little," I said softly, as if to myself, "every time I missed my mom, I baked cookies. She used to say, 'If you don't know what to say, let the smell speak for your heart.'" No one answered, but after a few seconds, a chair scraped back. Maya sat down. She reached for a cookie, sniffed it, and then took a small, hesitant bite. Soon after, Liam and Noah sat too. No arguing, no tears, just the quiet, methodical crunching of cookies. It was the silence of a ceasefire, the moment when soldiers begin to lay down their weapons. "Do you know how to tell stories?" Noah asked, his voice rough, his eyes still fixed on his plate. I set my spoon down and turned to face them. "Depends on whether the listeners can sit still." "I can," Maya said softly, glancing at her brothers. Liam nodded. Noah said nothing, but the guarded, hostile gleam in his eyes was gone. The call from Child Protective Services came a week later. Mrs. Gable set the phone down, her hands trembling. "They're coming to inspect," she whispered, the unspoken fear hanging in the air, the fear that the children might be taken away. The investigator, a stern-faced woman named Mrs. Denning, arrived on a foggy morning. I met her at the door. "I suggest you stay the entire day," I said quietly. "Don't let the children know you are here to observe. Just treat it as a normal day." She raised an eyebrow, surprised by my honesty, but she nodded. And so she watched. She saw Maya quietly pour me a glass of orange juice. She saw Liam, after accidentally dropping a spoon, immediately bend down and say, "Sorry," before anyone had even noticed. She saw Noah point to a messy, hand-carved nameplate at the dining table and say to me, "I can make you a new one if you want." Mrs. Denning witnessed it all. No staging, no performance, just small, quiet acts of healing. That afternoon, she sat in the living room with Alexander, Mrs. Gable, and me. We waited in silence, as if for a verdict. In 20 years working in child protection, I've learned one thing. A home isn't defined by the brightness of its chandeliers, but what you feel when you walk inside. She looked around the room, at the scribbled drawings on the fridge, the cushions lying askew. "And today," she said, looking directly at me, "I did not see an investigation. I saw a family learning to be a family again. This is no longer a report. This is proof of what's right." As she left, Maya ran to the porch to wave goodbye, not because she was told to, but because she wanted to.
6 months had passed since my first day. The seasons had changed, the fractured pieces of the Blackwood family were beginning to form a new picture. It was imperfect, but it was alive. I was still there, but now, when I baked in the morning, Liam would often join me, asking, "Are we making chocolate filling or strawberry jam today?" Maya began to call me Chloe instead of that lady. One day, she looked up from her coloring and asked, "Chloe, were you ever afraid of the dark?" Noah, still the most guarded, started sitting closer whenever I read to his siblings. One afternoon, he silently handed me a small, hand-drawn comic book. I was the main character, a superhero in a purple cape holding a wooden spoon like a sword. The title read, "The Calm Night." It was his name for someone who stayed. Alexander no longer used work as a refuge. He started coming home for dinner. One evening, he asked me, "Do you think we should build a reading room for the kids?" I nodded and added, "And a camping corner in the backyard, a place where children can teach grown-ups how to play again." One Sunday at a parent-teacher day, Maya was asked to read something she had written. Her voice was small but clear. "Family is where someone stays, even when you scream or cry or spill milk on the carpet. Family is someone who bakes every morning and tells stories when you're too scared to sleep alone. Family is someone who doesn't leave, even when you push them away." After class, she gripped my hand tightly. "I wrote that about you," she whispered. I leaned down and kissed her forehead. "I know." That afternoon, we all worked in the garden. Noah stuck a handmade wooden sign into the fresh soil. It read, "The Garden of Things That Don't Give Up." One late spring afternoon, I was sitting on the porch mending Maya's stuffed rabbit when the children rushed over. They were holding an invitation card to their end-of-year school ceremony. The principal had asked who would be coming with them. On the line for the attendee's name, printed in neat block letters, it read, "Chloe Blackwood, Guardian." They hadn't asked me, they had claimed me. Noah slipped a handmade bracelet onto my wrist. Maya handed me a drawing of 3 children and a woman reading stories under a lamp. The caption read, "Family is the one who stays." I couldn't speak. I simply pulled all 3 of them into my arms, burying my face in their hair. In a corner of the yard, Alexander stood quietly watching, a small, hopeful smile on his face. The man who once believed that providing was the same as loving was finally learning how to be present. He was learning how to be a father again. That night, as the lights in the house dimmed, I wrote a few lines in my notebook. Then I closed it. On the cover, I had changed its title. It no longer read Nanny Journal. It now read Things I Learned from Children Who Taught Me How to Be Loved. Outside, the wind rustled through the trees. Inside, 4 people, not bound by blood, but by shared fractures, were stitching themselves back together with the simplest, most enduring, and most miraculous thing of all, the choice to stay.
Perhaps we will not see you again, so subscribe to this channel to listen to more interesting stories.